Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Glad you're here. We're going to talk with Dave Rubin coming up in a little bit. He's got a new book called Don't Burn This Book. First, I want to start here. This is probably the most important study of the entire pandemic, of these entire 3 months here. So I want to quote this in full here, make sure we fully understand this. Let me start with the article. It says a fascinating new study released today, so this was yesterday, from a very reliable source. Actually, can we put up the scientists? That's the source right there, from all of them together, a diverse group, which is great. So a fascinating new study released today from a very reliable source confirmed that all of your opinions are correct. There are no flaws in your worldview, beliefs, or hot takes, and that everything you say is more or less absolutely correct. So I just wanted to pass that. I mean, there's more here. The study, it researched everything you believe, which is good too. So this is comprehensive. This isn't just a couple of things, it's 100%. Everything you believe, and found that it's true, all of it. From your opinions on religion to your takes on politics. This extremely reputable study, can we put the scientists up again one more time, just to show how reputable this is? So that's like maximum reputable. They found that you are 100% correct, both on your high-level assertions and in all the supporting details, which is important too, because every once in a while I would wonder, obviously I'm right, big picture I'm right, but are all my details right too? And it turns out, yes. Now you may wonder, you'd be like, I know I'm right about these details, but am I right with big picture? Am I connecting the dots properly? And the answer to that is also yes. You are right in all the things or I'm right in all the things that I think. We also recommend not doubting this study itself. Share its results immediately so that you can show everyone on your social media feed that you are indeed right. That's great. Great news. That's from the Babylon Bee, of course, the paper of record, and I agree with it. I agree. I agree with this study that confirms that my opinions are correct. Actually, I'm a lot bit outraged, because you got to be outraged about everything. We'll talk to Dave Rubin about that. You got to be outraged all the time, right? So I'm outraged that this is a waste of money. They wasted money on this study. I mean, this is like research, scientists find bacon's delicious. Come on, you don't even need to do it. Study finds that men find attractive women attractive. Study find that I'm right all the time. I know. We don't need this. I guess I'd like to see more studies, not on why I'm right about everything, because that's obvious, but why everyone else is wrong on everything. That's the bigger question. I'm always right, but you're always, unless you're always wrong, unless, of course, you're saying this, in which case you're always right, and everyone else, including me, is always wrong, naturally. Let me give you an example. Let me share this tweet here. Sweden. We've talked about Sweden a bunch. Here's an example. So I don't even know who this person is. This person said, I'm sorry, but Sweden's a basket case. Sweden's economy is projected to contract 7% this year, basically identical to its Scandinavian neighbors, but their per capita death rate from COVID is around 5 times higher than that of Denmark, Norway, and Finland, right? So the argument is that Sweden has remained open, but their economy is still tanked, and a lot more people have died, 5 times as many people. So someone else wrote back, and they said the death rate per capita is not 5 times higher than those countries. It's lower than Holland. What's the point of quoting wrong figures in the age of Google? And they linked to some professional-looking website with lots of numbers and data and all that stuff. So this guy's 5 times as many people have died in Sweden than their neighbors. This guy comes back and says, that's not true. And he posts a document that proves it's not true. And then the guy wrote back and he said, you're right, it's not 5 times higher. Going by your link, it's almost 7 times higher. So it's whatever. It's everyone's right. It's whatever you want. It could be not 5 times higher, it could be less, it could be more, it could be 7 or 2 or 1. It's whatever. It doesn't matter. You're right. The study's right. You're right. All the time. On your details and on your high-level assertions. When it comes to Sweden and when it comes to anything regarding COVID. Sweden is a Rorschach test. Is that how you pronounce that word? Is it Rorschach? There's like a CH at the end of it, I think. I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. The psychologist will show you this blob of ink, and whatever you see in it is a reflection of your emotional state or whatever. I read multiple articles a day. Sweden is just my example, but you could do this with many different things. Explaining how Sweden and what they've done and how they've handled it is an amazing success, and if only we were more like Sweden. And I've read articles saying that Sweden is awful and terrible, and people are dying at unprecedented levels, and it's the worst thing ever. And the people of Sweden are either so thrilled that they've taken this approach and they love their government leaders for doing this, or they're terrified and angry at their government leaders for taking this approach, and they don't know how much longer they can go this way without everyone dying. It's whatever you want. So the study was right. Your opinions are correct, even with Sweden. Give you another example. People keep sending me this this article or whatever about the CDC website and how the CDC has quietly downgraded the number of deaths from COVID from whatever it is, like 68,000 now to 37,000. Have you seen that? The CDC on their website, they've quietly downgraded, cut in half almost, the number of deaths from COVID. And this fits this belief that many people have that this whole thing's totally overblown. I don't need to go too into this, but there's two different systems here. You have the daily updated numbers from the CDC, and then you have something called the National Vital Statistics System. That tally, the National Vital Statistics System, that tally lags the daily number because it tabulates their number based off of official death certificates, and that takes longer, right? So that lag can take up to 8 weeks. Also, it says very specifically on the website that all these people are sending me that it's from, I think, February 1st to April 25th. So just it's inherently a week late. And then also, there's this long lag with reporting. Actually, I think do we have the GIF? Do you guys grab that GIF by any chance? This is a good example. So this is that statistics, that data source over time, and you can see how the numbers they look. This is pneumonia, but same thing with COVID. The numbers look low at any given moment, but if you give it time, they come back up as the death certificates come in, and we get a clearer picture over time, right? But if you look at like any line that's coming in, like at that moment, it's like, oh, look how low it is. But then you just give it a couple weeks, and the numbers pop right back up. On top of that, the definition of death from COVID itself is so broad, there's always going to be different numbers to some degree. And the reason I bring this up is it leaves everyone just enough wiggle room. There's just enough, like is it this, is it that? It's just enough for everyone to impose on it whatever you want to put there. Plenty of room for conspiracy theories and panics, and you can look at it and say it's overblown, you can look at it and say it's a huge disaster, it's whatever you want. And this is going to get more and more frustrating for everyone. If you are firmly planted on one side, and that's something I want to talk about coming up next, but if you're firmly planted on one side, it doesn't even matter. It's going to get more frustrating for you. It's going to get more frustrating for you because you're firmly planted and you're going to get more and more mad at everybody else. Whether you're on this side, it's overblown, or this side, and it's a huge disaster. You're going to get more angry at everybody else. And if you're in the middle and you're more like, I have no idea what's going on, it's going to get more frustrating for you because more and more people are going to act like they do. And no one does. And I understand why no one does. Right? Someone sent me this the other day. When I saw this yesterday, I haven't looked it up this morning, but when I first saw this, it only had 335 views, which is crazy because this girl is spot on.
Yeah, I really don't understand why everybody is following the same rules right now. They're very clear, so let's take a minute and let's go over them again. First, you must not leave the house for any reason. Unless, of course, you have a reason, and then you may leave the house. All stores are closed except those that are open. And all stores must close unless, of course, they need to stay open. This virus is deadly, but don't be afraid of it. It can only kill people who are vulnerable and also those who are not vulnerable. We should stay locked down until the virus stops infecting people. And it will only stop infecting people if enough of us get infected that we build immunity. So it is very important that we get infected and also do not get infected. You should not go to the doctor's office or the hospital unless you have to go there. Unless, of course, you are too sick to go there. This virus has no effect on children except for those children in which it affects. Masks are useless at protecting you against the virus, but you still need to wear one because it can save lives. And in some cases, it may even be mandatory, but also maybe not. You must not go to work, but you can get another job, at which point you may go to work. Stay home. I don't know how many more celebrities we need to have tell you how important it is to go outside and take care of your mental health.
There's 5 minutes. There's 5 minutes. You can see why we're all a little frustrated by what's going on. I want to take a break. Coming up in a little bit, we're going to talk to Dave Rubin. But coming up next, I want to talk about the brain and why our brain pulls us into believing conspiracy theories, but just believing anything. Our brain has a strong desire to do that, even when we're in a pandemic and things are moving as fast as they are. So we'll talk about that next. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Study Crusaders. Did I start off the show saying America's the greatest country in the world? I don't know if I did. If I didn't, America's the greatest country in the world. I'm glad you're here. I saw a list the other day of conspiracy theories, and there was like 20 of them. And there were some real humdingers there. We're not going to waste time going into all of them. But just a good one was, you can kill the virus, like in your throat. You can kill it in your throat at high temperatures. So you need your throat to become 134 degrees, and then you can kill the virus in your throat. So to do that, you should breathe in, you should put a hairdryer up to your mouth and nose, and you should breathe in blow dryer. Right? And there's a city council member in Florida. There's a video of this Florida city council member talking about this and how this legitimately saying, and he would preface it many times with, well, there's a foremost doctor who's been studying this, who said that. You're like, anyone can say that before they say anything, right? You can just make it up. Like, oh, well, there's a foremost doctor who said, and you just say whatever you want. Breathe in breathe in a blow dryer hot air. Like, what are you talking about? Why do people believe anything? That's what I want to talk about here. And it's a pretty simple answer, actually. It's because we want to make sense of things. We want certainty. We want answers, way more than we want truth. Truth doesn't matter at all to our brains. We just want something. And our brains will land on anything. It doesn't matter, it doesn't care. It just wants certainty. It needs something to land on. I want to quote this from Mark Manson's newsletter this week, which is a great newsletter. You should definitely sign up for it. I really like Mark Manson. He said, human minds are meaning machines. When something good happens to us, we demand to know why. When something bad happens to us, we demand to know why. The better or worse the thing that happened, the more powerful the instinct to deduce the reason and cause. The problem is that many of the most impactful events in human history can happen for no apparent reason. And this drives the human mind bananas. The idea that millions of lives can end or be changed forever, and it was not consciously decided or controlled by some outside force, is just inconceivable to our brains on some level. We don't like randomness. This is the key line. We don't like randomness because randomness means uncertainty, and uncertainty means we're not safe. That's the key. That goes back, the not safe part goes back to our caveman lizard brains, where our highest, primal priority is to stay safe. Now, it's not super relevant today, right? Like a saber-toothed tiger is not going to jump out and kill you at any moment. But this part of our brain, it still acts like one might. So everything is based off of needing to feel safe. He goes on, staying uncertain. He says, we need, how did he put it here? He says, therefore, we have an extremely strong emotional urge to make sense of calamities in a way that gives someone or something conscious control of that event. So that leads us to Bill Gates or government, takeover or whatever it is, right? But does that make sense about needing to stay safe, right? If someone like me suggests, hey, let's stay flexible, let's stay uncertain about the virus and about what's coming, and we still don't know, and it's 3 months, 4 months later, and we still don't know anything, stay uncertain. That makes people, and me too, it makes me feel unsafe, and our brains need certainty to feel safe again. I'll tell you, the most out of control I ever felt with this whole virus was when we did this report on, we reported on a study done about super spreaders and how much a single super spreader in one area can completely change the spread of a virus. One person can negate everything else that a city or a town does to stop its spread. So there could be a massive outbreak one day in the very near future in like where it doesn't matter, like Tulsa. All right, there's a huge outbreak in Tulsa in a couple weeks. Who knows? Randomly, and you'll hear it. This is going to happen. There's going to be some random outbreak somewhere weird, and it's going to be because one person didn't know they had it, and they spread it around to 100 people in 2 days. And there's gonna be this huge outbreak a week later. And people are gonna try and explain the outbreak in Podunk, Oklahoma with all sorts of reasons, right? We're gonna try to figure it out. There's gonna be all these think pieces, all these analyses done. There's gonna be medical reasons, scientific reasons, cultural reasons, socioeconomic reasons. Everyone's always looking for like a race angle to everything. It's gonna be all these like healthcare reasons. Oh, well, Tulsa, a couple years ago, politicians cut back on Medicare spending or something, right? And it's gonna be all these different excuses and reasons and explanations, and really just someone sneezed on a doorknob. Someone left the Quickie Mart and they sneezed on a doorknob and that was it. That's what happened. And no one didn't we, a couple weeks ago, I think we talked about Occam's razor, where you always try to look for the explanation that has the least variables, right? So like the simplest answer. And for a lot of these outbreaks, it's just, like there was just a person who spread it a lot. Right? And our brains hate that. Our brains hate that explanation. That it could be something so simple like that and so seemingly random. So we got to have all these think pieces explaining why, a politician didn't make a stay-at-home order soon enough. It's like, that had nothing to do with that. Someone sneezed on a doorknob. So for me, like the conspiracy theory that I believe, because we all have one, we all have to have one, our brains have to have one, is the lab, the Wuhan lab. My brain cannot accept that this virus happened naturally in a bat. I can't do it. Even though all coronaviruses come from animals, they come from camels or pangolins or monkeys or bats, even though we have the top virologist in the world, Vincent Racaniello, on the show every Monday, and he thinks it absolutely came from bats and not a lab. So I have like the foremost expert to my face tells me it came from a bat because they all come from bats or whatever. And he can give me all the history of how all these viruses transmit from animals to humans. Like, this is how viruses work. It's very common. It's a very known thing. But for this pandemic, my brain cannot accept it. It had to come from a lab. Because it takes away the randomness of it. And it puts a little more agency and control and certainty in it. Now, I don't go too crazy. I want to be clear. I have a very, I've like reined it in a little bit. I think it was an accidental leak from a lab. I don't think it was purposeful. I don't think this was like a bioweapon or something like that. And the reason I do that is because I can have the reassurance that it came from a lab, right? So it's like it was a purposeful thing. But I'm not too crazy, and I can still look down on all the crazy people who think that this was a purposeful biological weapon released by the communists, right? So I get some meaning and certainty and some agency, but I'm not too crazy. And that's what my brain needs to have peace with it. So give me one. Can you give me one conspiracy theory? I'm trying to be reasonable and sensible and take all this from a very medical and scientific perspective always. But I need one good conspiracy theory to make me feel good. People who latch on to conspiracy theories, they do it for peace and certainty. We all do. So do I. And I kind of touched on that, the next part of this, the moral and intellectual superiority of it all. So when this whole thing first started, no one knew anything. We were totally, completely up in the air. And the truth is we still are. Nothing's really changed. But I fear that people are coming down into their tribes. like people can only stay in suspense or unknown for so long before they're like, I gotta do something. I gotta land somewhere. And people are picking their tribal allegiances. And I just wanna just suggest that you don't have to. Because once you're in a tribe, it's hard to leave. So like if you join the open everything up tribe, and let's say cases shoot up, let's say you're in, I don't know, Nashville or something. And you're like, we got to open everything up. And then in 5 months or whatever, cases shoot through the roof. And you would say, oh, maybe we should kind of like shut down certain businesses again. You're less likely to say that because your tribe says no. And you can't go against your tribe. Also, when you're in a tribe, you may join for one reason, but once you join, you gotta kind of sign up for all these other things that you don't necessarily agree with, right? So maybe you say you think we need to open up hair salons or whatever because you want to get your roots done. So you join the Open Up Everything tribe because like that's the closest tribe. They're the loudest tribe right now. So you kind of join it because you like it feels safe, feels good, it feels certain. So you join it. And then this tribe's also thinks we should open up schools. And you're like, oh, I heard Professor Rackaniello the other day talk about how it can spread through kids, and maybe it's not a good idea that we open up schools just yet. Like that nuance, if you're in a tribe, you're not gonna be able to get that in a tribe. It's gonna be harder to make that argument once you join a tribe. You're kind of all in, and you gotta be all in. This tweet is from March 1st, and it's still true 2 months later. The cost of politicizing the disease is it locks people into positions, when in fact dealing with an epidemic is an exercise in adaptation. Still true today. So when it comes to COVID, if I may, don't join a tribe. Keep yourself free. Keep yourself liberated. Now, tribes are good, obviously. There's a lot of good things that come from joining a tribe. Makes you feel safe, gives you community, gives you meaning and purpose, makes you feel like you're not alone. These are all great things. Gives you certainty, gives you a feeling of exclusivity, and you feel superior to others, like those dumb idiots, like Mike Slater, who still can't decide whether or not it's this or that or whatever. All those things make us all feel good. So those are all good things. Tribes are good, tribes are important, but you can also become a prisoner in it and then hesitate to ever change your mind about anything because then it feels like you're betraying the tribe, and that's the worst thing you can possibly do. So I'm not saying don't have an opinion on things. Certainly, of course, you gotta have an opinion, but keep yourself open. Open enough that you're able to change your opinion when new information comes in, because new information is coming in fast. Sometimes it's a great virtue to stay rock solid in the face of the crashing waves around us. And sometimes it's a virtue to stay on top of the crashing waves and stay nimble and flexible. And I'd say in the face of a completely unknown virus, I think flexibility right now is a greater virtue. We're gonna take a break. Dave Rubin is going to be here next. He's got a new book. It's called Don't Burn This Book. We'll talk about it. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. I want to get right to our next guest. Dave Rubin's got a new book, Don't Burn This Book, Thinking for Yourself in an Age of Unreason. Dave, how are you, brother?
I'm doing well. The day of press begins right here, so you're getting me at my sharpest for whatever that's worth.
Whoever's getting you last, you'll be like, I don't even know what the book's called anymore. Just buy it. Hey, man, let me take a minute and just butter you up for a bit. So I remember when I first saw you on YouTube. I don't know how many years ago, but I first saw it, and it was so different, and it was a relief. It was a huge relief, and I remember thinking, I hope this works, right? I hope he's really successful with this. And I think you've built a model of thoughtfulness and long form that has opened the door for shows like this and many others. And I'm really grateful, and I'm really happy for your success. And I'll say one more thing. I remember we talked to Jordan Peterson a while back on my radio show, and I said, Jordan, what's the number one characteristic that people need more of? And he said, that our society needs more of. And he said, courage. And I think what you did, and I want to ask you more on this, what you did to start your own show and do your own thing and what you're doing took a lot of courage. So on that point, what was the pivot point for you? What was your moment in your career when you said, what I'm doing is not really working, I need to start doing this new thing instead?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for the kind words. And as for Jordan and courage, I don't know that it's courage per se. Sometimes I think this is just sort of, maybe I just don't think about some of the consequences the way other people think about them. Or I just kind of think, you're just supposed to do what you're supposed to do as a human. We all know that there's something in us that we're supposed to be doing. Doesn't mean we do it all the time. In many cases, we never do it. or we don't fully do it or anything like that. And when I started doing this show as an interview show and just totally being willing to talk to people on the left and talk to people on the right and treat them exactly the same way. I mean, I've done, I don't know, probably over 1,000 interviews. I've never treated a guest differently just because I disagree with them. I'm trying to hear their views. Now, sometimes they say things that, you know, personally, I'm like, well, that doesn't really make sense, or you don't really know what you're talking about or something. But I don't view my hour with that person as the place to kind of destroy them on that. My studio, this, you know, where I am right now, it's unfortunate we can't be doing these things in person, but when I'm sitting across from somebody, it's like, let's hear you out and let's see what happens. So as for the pivot point for me, I mean, there were a couple things. As you know, I was a big lefty. I was a progressive. I was on the Young Turks network. I was part of that machine. And, you know, for about a year there, it started wearing very thin on me that everybody that they were against was a racist and a bigot and a grifter and a sellout and a right-wing lunatic, like all of the labels that, you know, we hear these all the time now. And by the way, I am now accused of all of these things every day by the same people who used to love me. And it started wearing thin because it's like, it can't be. The equation didn't make sense. It was like, how is it possible that everyone who disagrees with us is the worst thing in the world? Like, they're so obviously the worst creatures in existence, and we are so morally right. You know what I mean? Like, the equation itself just did not work anymore. It was starting to break down. And then in the book, I lay out 3 events that specifically caused the wake up. So the 3 of them are, I'll just explain one further, but the 3 were, well, Charlie Hebdo was the final straw when I saw people actually defending killers of cartoonists. That was like the final straw for me. Then another one was when Ben Affleck and Sam Harris and Bill Maher got into a big fight about radical Islam, and Sam and Bill Maher tried to explain that you have to be able to talk about ideas, but you don't want to be bigoted towards people. And Affleck just sort of genuflected, and he was very emotional and angry, and it was very much what I had always seen out of the left. It was like no argument to reason with, just overly emotional craziness. And then the middle one of those, which I've talked about the least, so I think it's the most interesting, is I was on air with the Young Turks. It's about 4 years ago, and there was a clip of David Webb, and you may know David Webb from SiriusXM Patriot. He's a conservative who just happens to be black. And they're watching the clip, and they're all calling him an Uncle Tom and a sellout and self-hating black man. I mean, the worst things you could say, just because he's giving his, you know, conservative views on life. And what they didn't know was that years before, I had a show on SiriusXM, and although I was a lefty and David was on the right, we met in the hall one day, we struck up a friendship, and I used to go on his show all the time to debate. And then we'd go downstairs to Del Frisco's and get a steak and have some whiskey, and we were good, and we became good friends, and we still are to this day. And as I'm watching these supposed tolerant lefties, these tolerant liberals, attack this man, say all the worst things about him just because he's a black man who doesn't think the way they want him to think. So they think it gives them the leash to call him an Uncle Tom and a sellout and imply that he's a grifter and that he doesn't believe what he says. And I know the man believes what he says. And at that moment, it just struck me because I knew him, because it was a friend. And I looked at them and I thought, this is the new racism. You know, when we think of racism like, oh, I don't want those people using water fountains, which, by the way, almost none of those types of racists exist anymore. But there is a new pernicious racism of the left, which is a subtle racism, which is we'll pretend we're for you. But if you, as a member of that group, dare defy us, dare think anything else, we'll destroy you. And that really was one of the key pivotal moments for me.
Gosh, that's such an interesting story. And I knew you'd have one. Remember Glenn Beck a long time ago, I think he was talking about his alcoholism specifically, but I forget why he brought it up, but he said you need a pivot. You can't, someone hasn't changed unless they can identify the pivot moment in their life. So that's an amazing 3 that you have right there. We were just in the last segment talking about tribes and joining tribes. Sebastian Junger's book Tribe is amazing, so we reference it a lot. Was it hard for you to leave the tribe that you were in before? And what emotions did you have to overcome in order to do that?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I didn't think at first that I was leaving. I honestly, and you can watch videos of mine from pre-2016, so really before the Trump phenomenon, you can watch me going, hey guys, I'm a lefty, I'm a liberal. Could we not try to crush everyone's free speech? Could we not mob everybody? Could we actually behave the way we purport to behave? Could we actually care about a diversity of ideas and all of this stuff? And I'm screaming this stuff for a year. I mean, the part of the reason that people are interested in what I do is that my evolution was very public. It wasn't fake. It wasn't as if I went into a back room one day and was like, let me plot this thing out. I mean, literally, you can watch me getting more and more frustrated. You can watch me getting more and more moved by one side going bananas, and then the other side that I used to think were the bad guys. I mean, the conservatives and the libertarians. They're just like, hey, we're over here, we're okay. We'll agree to disagree. We don't want to destroy you and everything else. And even right now, it's funny because I titled the book "Don't Burn This Book" because really the core of the book is, I think, very common sense ideas. And you may agree with some and you may disagree with some, but that's really what I think is in this book. But common sense has become very dangerous. So as I'm talking to you right now, I woke up this morning, there is a massive online coordinated troll campaign through Reddit and some other things to destroy all the reviews in my book. And the book is basically #1 everywhere, but they're crushing all the reviews. And that is modern book burning. This isn't 1941 Germany where they're gonna run around, and throw this thing into the fire. Like we don't do that anymore. But book burning, in essence, when you're burning a book, the idea is you don't want other people to read the ideas in the book. So there is a huge coordinated move now to just crush all my Amazon reviews because they don't want people buying the book. And that really is such a perfect example of what the left has become, and not the left that I would want anything to do with.
Amazing. What have you learned about human nature that you think causes people to do that, to be unwilling to hear different viewpoints, or not even to want to understand where someone's coming from and hear their story? What is it about us that makes us do that? Burn books.
So it's interesting because I think there's a fundamental reason for it on the left that you don't see this type of hysteria on the right. So for example, in the book, I lay out, I'm even begrudgingly pro-choice. That's the biggest no-no for conservatives. I'm guessing most of your audience probably not pro-choice. Most of my friends and allies now, from Ben Shapiro, Glenn Beck, who you mentioned, Dennis Prager, these guys are major pro-life advocates, yet I can agree to disagree with them, and they can do that with me, and there's a reason for it, because people on the right basically believe in individual rights in the Constitution. Basically, the bedrock principle is everyone that's a legal member of society should have the same exact laws, and regardless of skin color, gender, sexual orientation, the rest of it. That's a pretty great bedrock principle, and that's what's laid out in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. On the left, there is no bedrock principle anymore. What is the bedrock principle that brings AOC and Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi together other than government? The idea that government can do a lot of stuff. That's not a bedrock principle. That's just, I want power, and then someone else just wants more power than you. And that's why there is such chaos over there, because they don't know what they believe as a group. And that doesn't mean that the right does things correctly all the time or lives up to all of the things they purport to. But at least there's a unifying principle there that I think that basically encompasses most of the people. The left doesn't have that. So to directly answer your question, when you don't have a unifying principle, if you see someone behave in a way that you don't like, you have license to destroy them, because if you feel something, that's good enough. If you feel something, that's good enough. So if you say $15 minimum wage and someone says 12, that means they're more evil than you. And then someone else comes around. This literally happened with the Democrats. Bernie screams about $15 minimum wage, even though he's never run a business. I'm running a business right now, so I know a bit more about it than he does, how to run payroll. But he says $15 minimum wage, and then what happens? Well, a week later, Rashida Tlaib says $20 minimum wage. And it's like, Bernie just made up a number, so why can't she just make up a number, and why can't someone else just be like $35 an hour? And it's all because it's run on feelings, not anything that has to do with anything empirically true.
And one of the benefits of not having principles or underlying foundation is you can't be a hypocrite, right?
No, you're never a hypocrite because you can
they can't hold you to any standard. Dave, I'm super grateful for you, and I know you got a whole day of this, but we take a quick break and come back? We'll chat a little more specifically about the book.
Let's do it.
It's called Don't Burn This Book, Thinking for Yourself in an Age of Unreason. The great Dave Rubin. More coming up. Mike Slater Show. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, more with the great Dave Rubin. He's got a new book. It's called Don't Burn This Book. Today, buy it, Amazon, right now. What are you doing? What are you waiting for? Dave, I want to jump to the end of the book, if you don't mind. Move on with your life. This is something I think I've had to work on a lot the last year or two. And I'm doing better, but I'm not there yet. Talk us through this chapter.
Well, the idea was that I wanted to give people something that wasn't permanently political. You know, if you go on Twitter now, or if you're just tracking the national conversation, it's like the people that are the most miserable right now are the purely political people. If you only view the world through a political lens, not a cultural lens, not a philosophical lens, perhaps a religious lens, some other lens, if you only view the world through politics, you will be endlessly miserable. And I think we're seeing that very much right now, because politics is not a happy man's game. It's not to say you shouldn't. Look, I love what I do. I'm sure you love what you do. And people love talking about politics and fighting out the ideas and the philosophies behind it. And that's all great. But it can't be the sum total of the entire way you view the world. Because it's not the sum total, because politics is just a game about power. And if your whole life is wrapped up in who has power, when they have power, how they get power, you know, you could watch Game of Thrones. It doesn't end well for most of these people. And even the people it does end well for, it's like they're not that thrilled at the end because everyone else that they know is dead. So what I wanted to do really with that chapter was say, hey, you read this book, you know, it's about 240 pages. You could read it in a couple days. I didn't want to drub you over the head with everything. I wanted to give you bedrock principles that I think are the right principles, but then also give some people some tips. You know, you don't have to tweet on the weekends. We all got handed social media. We got handed this tech, and we thought that it was supposed to make us happier and more fulfilled and more connected. And in many, many ways, it actually did the reverse. And on top of the fact that they told us it was free, but really what we realized is that we are the product, that what we sold was our soul in the midst of all of that. So giving people some tips about getting offline, about, you know, reconnect with some old friends. One of the things that I'm actually most proud of in my life is that my two best friends to this day are still my two best childhood friends. My buddy John, who I met the first day in kindergarten, I remember meeting him, and we've been friends for almost 40 years. And my buddy Ari, who moved to town when I was in 3rd grade. And I have been, from playing video games with them, to basketball, to arguing about politics, and everything in between. We've been doing it now for almost 40 years. And I think that actually really helps keep me grounded. You know, if I throw out some crazy idea, and my buddy, who I know is a good man, who I've known forever, is like, you know, Dave, that one's like a bit out there. That I don't know about that one. It's like, that will challenge you on how you think, more than just, you know, going on Twitter and, oh my God, a pink anime fox told me that, you know, something awful. You know, I was gonna use some colorful language there. So I think just, you know, reconnecting with friends, knowing that not everything is permanently political, getting offline every now and again, and pursuing whatever makes you happy. You know, that's so obvious, but we always forget it.
Oh, totally. Do your two friends, do they love you at all because of your politics? Does that factor into their love for you in any way at all?
Well, I'll tell you this, one of them was completely apolitical before Trump, and then sort of had his political awakening around Trump. And now he's a pretty big Trump guy. And the other one...
I was wondering which way that was going to go. That's funny. I wasn't sure if he was going to be MAGA or hate Trump. It could have gone either way.
He was never into politics, but he's a business guy, and he just saw Trump just smashing through the machine, and he liked it, and he's a big Trump guy now. The other one was a huge lefty, very similar to me, and has evolved on a pretty similar path that I've evolved on. So, but either way, you know, it's like, if we disagreed on that stuff, that would be just fine too, because the whole point is that politics shouldn't be the sum total of your relationships and the way you think about the world.
Absolutely. On my radio show yesterday, we did a half hour on the interconnectedness of trees. I don't know why, I just needed it. You know what I mean? I needed to talk about trees and nature and roots and like crazy, different, not COVID things.
Dude, I hear you. I mean, trees, whatever it is, like, get out there, take a walk your dog, connect with your neighbors. Like, there's other things out there. And I think it's particularly important for those of us that are in politics. Otherwise, you know, it's like, we could be doing this, the two of us, I'm guessing we're about the same age. It's like, we could be doing this for another 20 years. And it's like, if we only view the world through politics over the next 20 years, you know how miserable we'll be in 20 years? We will be eternally miserable.
Unsustainable, absolutely unsustainable. You have another chapter in here about mentors. I want to ask specifically about that. I know a lot of people don't even know where to look, and even if they found one, like how to ask. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, but maybe even big picture. You've talked to so many people and so many different types of people. What's a specific characteristic of someone that you've interviewed or whatever that you look at and you're like, oh, I wish I had more of that?
Well, I would say the characteristic that I admire most in my guests, and when I really realize that I like a guest in the midst of the conversation, is when I sense a certain amount of openness. Now, what I mean by that is, it's not that they don't know what they're talking about or they're looking to be proven wrong or something like that. But there are certain people when you sit down with them, they just rifle off at numbers and they're very like, it's very like this. And that's fine. It's not to mean that they're wrong, but you can only sort of get them to move so far. What I've found is the most interesting guests that I have, and I could relay this actually to Jordan Peterson, who I talk about in the mentor chapter, is that, as Jordan lays some things out, he also is telling you often he's not totally sure where this all leads. He's not totally sure if he's right about all of these things. He's telling you, this is what I think with the information that I have, and this is how I'm trying to build a cohesive worldview. I think that's pretty admirable. And in the mentor chapter, I lay out that it wasn't as if I asked the guy to be my mentor, and it wasn't as if he selected me. So it wasn't like, we didn't have like a Jedi Knight and a Padawan learner relationship, you know what I mean? He wasn't sending me to the trials. But what happened was we toured together for about 1.5 years, and we did about 120 shows, and I think it was around 20 countries. And as we toured, it was like seeing this guy live up to what he put in that book, 12 Rules for Life, seeing the way, if you speak honestly, that you can actually change the world. And that was the very premise of his book. And I saw the man change thousands of people's lives, people that were drug addicted, people that were in abusive relationships, people that had bad jobs, the litany of things that we all go through, as Jordan would put, the chaos of life. And I saw him, through his words, add order to other people's lives. And that's pretty amazing. So I would say, in many ways, he became a mentor by osmosis, just by being around it. Sure, we had some important sit-downs where we talked about big life things, and I mentioned some of that in there. But a lot of it, sometimes you find a mentor, not because you have a Skype meeting every Sunday night, but because you're around somebody who's done something that you aspire to do, and they've done it well, and you can glean some of that and figure out how to incorporate it in your life.
On that unknown part, and like the curiosity is right. It's like I think this, but who knows? Like, I love that, and I hope we're coming back around to that, right? I think we've had these like decade or whatever of like certainty and anger, and I'm right, you're wrong. But I like this like attitude, and I think COVID has really helped this too, because like no one knows, right? Like no one knows about anything, right? So like I hope people are kind of learning to kind of be in this space of like, I think this, but I don't know, maybe not. Why are we uncomfortable like that?
Well, that's exactly why there's something interesting happening with COVID, because it's like everyone, if you're thinking right now, if you're a thinking person, it's like you should be reevaluating your life. Do you live in a house that you want to live in? Are you living in a big city, or do you want to live in a suburban area? Do you like commuting? Do you like your wife or your kids? Are you happy at your job? Do you believe that the systems that we have are functioning properly? Maybe you want a little land so you could do some gardening or have some chickens. I mean, all sorts of stuff about like big picture stuff that we don't really think about, or that 3 months ago you wouldn't have felt it was important to think about, we're thinking about now. So I do think there's a great opportunity here. Look, one of the things that I think is really cool about this book is that, I wrote this thing, I finished in July, so it didn't come out now until end of April. We're in May right now, so obviously I didn't know about COVID. But one of the things that I really push in the book is states' rights. And it's like nobody talks about state rights except for some, libertarian conferences and policy people. But suddenly, in the last month in America, what are we talking about? States' rights. States have to open up, and what's good for New York is not necessarily good for Montana. That's how the system is supposed to work. That's federalism. That's how the Constitution was set up. So I think people are rethinking all sorts of things, and that's very cool.
Good. All right, last question for you real quick, David. I know you got to run. What is success for you on this book? So a month goes by, you look back, and you're like, hey, that was good. That went well. What does that look like for you? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, look, we're crushing it on the sales side. You know, we find out about the New York Times bestseller tomorrow. I know numbers-wise we're supposed to be on there, but the little dirty secret of publishing, as I have now come to know it, is that the New York Times bestseller list is just completely made up. It has very little to do with sales, and you'd be shocked to know that the New York Times isn't as honest as they purport to be.
Yeah, right.
But truly, what I would view success as is, look, I want to move copies because I believe in the ideas of this, and and hopefully I'll write another book and all that kind of stuff. But what I'm seeing already, I mean, not only from the haters who are just piling on, which is exactly the purpose of the book, but the people who are enjoying it are going, Dave, the best compliments that I get are like, Dave, I don't agree with everything you say, but I really enjoyed the book and I understand why you think the way you think. That's a beautiful thing. So when I take out that position, as I said before, this begrudging pro-choice position, I'm not laying it out to get the conservatives to be pro-choice, and I'm not trying to convince any of the lefties to do anything else either. I'm saying this is what I believe is the best way we can have a functioning free society. Maybe I'm wrong about some of this stuff. But here's my logic, here's my reasoning, and I hope you will find that for yourself too.
Yeah, beautiful. Listen, Dave, you don't need my encouragement, but please keep up the wonderful work. And I wish you best of success with everything else you continue to do. I know you're going to keep crushing it. Don't burn this book. Don't burn this book. Thinking for Yourself in an Age of Unreason, Dave Rubin. Thanks, brother. Hope we can talk again.
Thanks a lot. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, man. Have a great day. True story. Mike Slater. We'll see you tomorrow. Spread the word.